Probably the best known of all the insects are the bees. They are also inextricably linked with the term honey. Logical, considering that honeybees produce it within their hives. But what about the 565 other species of bee found in Germany? The many species of native bee, colloquially known as wild bees, lead diverse and varied lives. While some species dig caves as nests, others, such as the cuckoo bees, trick other species into raising their young for them. So, without further ado, let's dive into the world of bees. Only 9 species of bee in the world actually produce honey as we know it. They live in highly social groups in which there is a clear division of labor. This division is necessary because up to 50,000 bees can live together in so-called honey hives. The life of the wild bees, however, looks very different. Most wild bee species live solitary lives. This means they build their nests and care for their young alone, without help from other bees. Each species of wild bee has different requirements for their nesting places, and only 30 to 40 species feel at home in artificial nesting aids. Almost half of all species nest underground. Often, pre-existing tunnels in the ground are reappropriated as brood chambers. For example, this is the case with bumblebees, a type of wild bee. Many other species dig their own brood tunnels. These species require particular soil types which are comprised of sand or clay in order to build their nests. Some other species require rotting wood or empty snail shells within which to build their brood chambers. Depending on the species, one female on her own can build and provide for up to 30 brood cells within her 4 to 8 week lifespan. Under good conditions, however, multiple females are able to build their nests very close together, like their spring-collied bees here. Once the brood cells are finished, a mixture of pollen and nectar is stored within the cell, within which the bee then lays an egg before closing the cell. Sheltered securely inside the cell, the bee larva begins to develop. It has enough food within the cell to fully develop, as well as to sustain itself through the winter until spring arrives. Honeybees also collect nectar and pollen to feed their offspring. However, they collect much more than the larva can eat. This surplus food is stored as honey for harder times, such as winter or periods of rain. All species of wild bee are regular flower visitors because even as adults they feed off pollen and nectar to sustain themselves. Those species that build their own nests collect pollen and nectar to feed their offspring as well as themselves. Meanwhile, the larvae of cuckoo bees profit from the labor of other bee species, feeding off the host bee's stored food reserves. The results of a global study has shown that while honeybees can supplement the flower pollination services of wild bees, they cannot to replace it. This is due to the pollination efficiency that comes from the incredible diversity of species within wild bees and their vastly different habitat requirements and foraging preferences. Some species become active despite very low temperatures, while others are specialized to specific flower types. Red clover flowers, for example, have long and very narrow floral tubes that make pollination impossible for most wild bee species as their proboscises are too short. Red clover flowers, which are a highly important agricultural food crop, can only be pollinated by a few specialized species of bumblebee that have very long proboscises. Speaking of bumblebees, it has been observed that bumblebees visit 3 to 5 times more flowers than honeybees do within the same time frame. 2,634 separate flower visits were recorded within the 100-minute-long collection flight of a single bumblebee. But wild bees cannot provide sufficient pollination services on their own. Vital for the successful pollination of both wild and cultivated crops is a highly abundant and species-rich functional group made up of wild bees and other pollinating insects such as hoverflies. This is because many plants can only be pollinated by specific, highly specialized species of insect. We would like to thank Flo from FlowBee and Marcus from Carroll Family Beekeepers for the support with this video. If you are interested in learning more about the insects living just beyond your doorstep, then subscribe to this channel. We will be adding many more fascinating videos about the world of our native six-legged neighbors. See you next time.